The Secrets of Doctor Who is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, episode 167.
Aye! Don't be scared. All of this is new to you, and new can be scary. When people need help, I never refuse. There's this moment when you're sure you're about to die, and then you're born. I know exactly who I am. I'm the Doctor. Ta-da! Ooh. Should be fine.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the season finale of this latest series of Doctor Who called The Timeless Children. And joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Aiken. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
And Father Corey Stika. Hi, Father Corey.
How's it going?
Very good. Thank you. So, folks, if you have not yet done so, you should please go to Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get podcasts from, and subscribe to the show. Be sure to keep subscribe to the show, because we got, even now the season is over, we've got a lot of great content coming your way, a lot of great episodes that we're looking at Classic Who and New Who, and a lot of good stuff coming. You don't want to miss any of it. If you're a Doctor Who fan, you're going to love it. So you can listen there, or you could go to our YouTube channel, our SQPN YouTube channel, and listen to all of our shows there as well. So, guys, it looks like it was the Cartmel Masterplan. Right?
Basically, yeah. Before we get into the episode, I want to mention briefly something that I've talked about before, which is kind of how we get to this point, because Chibnall has established off camera that Gallifrey has been destroyed, and Chibnall has established off camera the Cyber Empire has been destroyed. And I've commented about I'm not wild about this destroying empires off stage and then having them come back, having us just told about this by characters afterwards. And it put me in mind of a play, or an account of a play, by Stephen Leacock. Stephen Leacock is one of my favorite humorists. He was a Canadian economist 100 years ago, but he also wrote humor on the side. And he has a book called Behind the Beyond, in which he satirizes a modern play. And the play itself is called Behind the Beyond. And during the course of this play, we meet a character named Lady Cecily, and between acts 2 and 3, she goes off to Switzerland and dies. So when we come back at the beginning of Act 3, all of a sudden Lady Cecily is dead. And Leacock describes the audience's reaction like this: "Lady Cecily dead. Everyone in the theater gasps. Dead? But what an unfair way to kill her. To face an open death on the stage in fair hand-to-hand acting is one thing, but this new system of dragging off characters to Switzerland between the acts and then returning and saying they're dead is quite another." And that's how I feel. I mean, don't drag Gallifrey and the Cyber Empire off to Switzerland and come back and tell us they're dead. Show it to us.
Just thinking of the Cyber Empire, just to see some of that. I mean, they could have pulled a good story out of that, the whole cyber war and everything. Much less the Master destroying Gallifrey.
So, they did this once before, right? This was how the
Time War.
This is how Who returned to screen to the small screen was. Yeah. Oh, by the way, Gallifrey's gone. The Daleks are gone. And I wasn't a fan then, watching then, but I can imagine fans watching were kind of astounded that they would do this in between.
Yeah, and at least, they hinted there was going to be this big mysterious event, there had been this big mysterious event that we would eventually get more detail on. Mm-hmm. And then they gave that to us over the course of several years. We progressively learned more about it. By the 50th anniversary special, we saw the Time War itself. And so I'm more okay with that. But I don't get the feeling we're going to go back in the same way and explore exactly how the Master killed single-handedly, apparently, everyone on Gallifrey, because he didn't appear to have any allies he was working with in this case. It's not like he brought in the Cybermen and had them kill everybody. He seems to have done it by himself. And I don't think we're going to get detail on that. I think that's just a throwaway for convenience to get us to this point, because Chibnall, I think, decided he didn't want Gallifrey around because it takes too much of the mystery out of the Doctor.
Yeah,
which is the reason they got rid of it in between anyway, was to make the Doctor more mysterious. He's the lone survivor of Krypton.
Well, I really feel like the difference between how they started the series, because they were starting the series in 2005 with a clean slate. A lot of this back history is gone. They don't have to worry about it. They can start kind of from fresh while still pulling on that back history. This just seems, I don't know, almost trying to duplicate that. And, one thing I mentioned when we talked about the Jadoon episode is this feels that it felt like a kind of a hat tip to Russell T Davies. Well, this almost, the whole destruction of Gallifrey, and spoilers, it's definitively destroyed, like supposedly,
well,
in
not,
this episode.
Not physically, but all life there is destroyed by the end of
everything
this.
organic is gone. So anyways,
you can always reseed.
Yeah, exactly. But it just feels like he's saying, well, this worked great for Russell T Davies, and I really like Russell T Davies, so I'm going to do the same thing Russell T Davies did and completely wipe out Gallifrey.
I don't know. I mean, it's just give him the benefit of the doubt. I don't know that he would have thought of it in that fashion, but more of, I think it goes back to this Cartmel Masterplan, which we're going to get to this at the end as we wrap things up in this episode. But I think, just as an initial thought, I think he's thinking, how do we bring more mystery back to the Doctor? That was the Cartmel Masterplan's the whole shtick.
Purpose.
Was, how do we bring more mystery back to the Doctor? And we've had so much take place on Gallifrey, more than ever before in the 12th Doctor's time, I think. And then even, with the regeneration of the 10th Doctor, we had so much of Gallifrey keep entering into it that a lot of the mystery was gone. And you had the constant interaction with Gallifrey, and this constantly sitting there.
I think that's a scrupulous showrunner thing. I don't think I've never thought that Gallifrey demystified. I mean, I'm fine with having a more mysterious Doctor, so I'm fine with what they did in this episode. But I don't think knowing about Gallifrey, or even seeing Gallifrey once every few seasons, is a problem. I mean, like, for example, when we saw it at the end of the War Games, that was significant. I didn't think that deflated the Doctor. When we saw it in the Three Doctors, that was significant. That didn't deflate the Doctor. When we saw the Time Lords put Tom Baker on in Genesis of the Daleks, that involved Gallifreyan interaction. And we haven't even had anything like that in New Who. We've only ever in New Who had brief moments of the Doctor interacting with Gallifrey, and they've never sent him on a mission. He's never cooperated with them.
Right. But I think with the 12th Doctor, Capaldi's Doctor, going to Gallifrey and interacting at a pretty in-depth level.
Yeah, one episode.
Well, it was several, but yeah. But, I'm just thinking that the idea is probably to isolate the Doctor again. The Doctor is interesting when he or she is cut off from his or her people, and that's what they're doing.
Time machine. The Doctor can see his people anytime he wants.
Right. Well, let's talk about this episode, and we'll, as we wrap things up, we'll come back to this topic, and especially the implications of what happens. So we begin with we pick up from last time. This is the second part of a two-parter. So we pick up with the Master having just come through the boundary to the boundary planet from Gallifrey, and now he's saying to the Doctor, all right, you need to come with me back to Gallifrey, because to learn the truth that I've been hinting at since the first episode of the season, and you have to leave all the humans here behind permanently, to die at the hands of the Cybermen. And if you don't agree to this, I'm going to start shrinking them. I'll start using my compression weapon to shrink them down to nothing.
Yeah, I like in the scene, I like when we get to see the two sides of the Master, where he's being bad, but not completely bad. And so even though he does not want them to come through, and is willing to use the tissue compression eliminator on them to get the Doctor to go along, as he's leaving, he says, "Good luck, humans."
Yeah.
And I like that.
just sort of reiterate, the master in this is the master like the master that
Sacha Dhawan's master. Oh,
yes, yeah, he is a lot like a little like Missy, but more like what's his name, Harold Saxon, the Saxon master, who is crazy, on the edge of losing it all the time. Where unlike the Roger Delgado master, unlike the classic Who masters, that we know, and so Missy was a little less.
Has a Daffy Duck moment in this episode.
Yes, he does. I mean, I enjoy his the Sacha Dhawan's master. I mean, it's really kind of manic and crazy.
He's not quite as manic though as the John Sims master.
Yeah, not as over the top.
Right, and the last time we saw the John Sims master with the 12th Doctor, he was a lot less so. He was a lot more in control. So anyway, the humans.
Go ahead. So the Doctor and the Master go through Stargate to get to Gallifrey, and then the Galactica does an atmospheric jump in.
That's right.
Over the algae planet.
Right, and there's the cyber carrier, and the Cybermen regain the ship while the Graham and Yaz and their friends are running away from them. And then when the Master and the Doctor arrive in Gallifrey, the Master says, "Look upon my work, Doctor, and despair," which is a nice connection.
Yeah. That's a quotation. He's adapted it a little, but it's a quotation from the poem Ozymandias by Percy Bysshe Shelley. And the Doctor's gonna at the end of the episode, the Doctor's gonna throw a Walt Whitman quote right back at him. So you have this Doctor Master poetry smackdown quotation duel over the course of this episode.
Well, and we just saw Percy Shelley, who held the Cyberium not long ago.
As
coincidence?
The first part of the 3-part series.
Yeah. Well, I was wondering, is this a coincidence or just a happy coincidence, or was it intentional? I don't know. So the Master now reminisces about, being back in Gallifrey. Remember, Doctor, that's where we used to run through the streets when we were ditching class. And
to escape from Barusa, who we know.
Lord Barusa. Yep.
Who was Barusa? That was
Barusa was a Time Lord he was one of the Cardinals, and he was also like the mentor of the Doctor.
Oh, okay.
Wasn't he Lord President 1.2?
Yeah, I believe so.
And then the Master sort of revels in all the death that he's caused. That sort of the crazy thing comes out, and he then warns the Doctor that, by the way, I know what you're thinking. I can see in your eyes. You're thinking about how you're gonna try to save all your little human friends, and just stop it. And so we have we had TARDIS separation. Now we have Doctor separation, or companion separation from the Doctor. So that our classic plot devices are up here. Now Graham, meanwhile, comes up with the idea of the humans on board the cyber carrier putting on cyber armor and using that to sneak off the ship, which I'm glad someone points out. That armor is full of like body parts, right?
Yeah, human remains.
Yeah, but they say human remains, but they're not rotting in there. I mean, it's not skeletons and decomposed ick. It's just you got to take the host out of there, or you got to take the human part out. Right. But it should be, it might be a little bloody, I guess, but it won't be, decay.
Yeah, given how integrated they probably are, it's probably not a pleasant process.
It's probably better than like climbing into a Dalek, which we've seen where they've ripped the Dalek part out and climbed in. So
right. So on the Boundary Planet, Ryan and Sharmus and Ethan are preparing to take up arms to defend themselves against the Cyberman execution squads that have been beamed down.
Yeah, because the Master got in his iPhone and told the Cybermen to come through.
Yeah.
But take care of those humans that are there.
Right.
So the ones he just wished good luck. Now he and the dialogue went by a little fast, but it seems like the Master doesn't care whether they're killed or assimilated.
Yeah.
Right.
But do one of those. I mean, send out an extermination patrol or a recruitment patrol or whatever you call it.
Right.
And then the lone Cyberman says send extermination squads. So he's not interested in converting them or upgrading them. And we'll find out why. I liked how the Master, when he's talking on his iPhone to the lone Cyberman, he uses 1970s CB slang.
Yep.
He says, "Breaker 1-2, calling all Sibes." That's Citizens Band radio slang from the 1970s. Breaker, breaker, good buddy.
Yep.
Also, I like how Ryan is talking to Gandalf, and he says, "I'm not too sure about weapons." So he's like bought into the Doctor Who woke virtue signaling that's been thrown off for 2 seasons. And Gandalf, it just throws it back in his face and says, "You could be a pacifist tomorrow. Today you have to survive."
Right.
Yep.
Fight
Which
or
is
die.
like, thank you for the real politic.
Yeah. And, I had an interesting discussion with my wife as we watched this about this. And, we noted that last episode, Ryan and the Doctor and the others had no problem using certain kinds of weapons on the Daleks, as long as they, the Daleks, on the Cybermen, as long as they didn't look like guns. And how sometimes it feels like that it's really the Doctor's objection is to weapons that look like guns, as opposed to, with triggers, as opposed to weapons. She uses weapons in previous Doctors have used weapons,
including in this episode.
Right. But
lots of big weapons.
Yes, including the last one, by the way.
Yeah.
But it's not a gun, so it's okay. It's kind of funny how that plays into it. But Ryan picks up his laser gun and his basketball bomb, which we'll get to in a second. His
basketball bomb, yeah.
Yeah, I like how Ryan, who we saw in the first episode of the season playing basketball with his mates back in Sheffield, admits he's not a very good basketball player, because we know from last season that Ryan has this coordination issues due to whatever condition he has, and so
dyspraxia.
Thank you, and but he manages to lob that thing right into the middle of
perfect shot,
of the squad.
And I like how they set it up with the very first episode with him playing basketball as a nice callback.
That was a long setup. So we're back at the Citadel of Gallifrey. The Doctor and the Master are inside the Citadel at this point.
And they're in a room called the Matrix Room, which is right next to the Panopticon. The Panopticon is kind of like the central meeting place for the Time Lord Council and stuff. And the Master alludes to he and the Doctor having graduated in that room and also killing presidents, which is a direct reference to what the Master did in The Deadly Assassin.
Yep.
Right.
And also the Matrix features in The Deadly Assassin. And I thought this episode's use of the Matrix, and I guess we should explain for people who may not be familiar with it, but the Matrix is the repository of all Time Lord knowledge. It's like a big holographic data bank. And in the past, when they've gone into the Matrix, it's been for purposes of it being a malfunctioning holodeck. So you go into the Matrix and somebody's trying to kill you using holographic imagery. And I've never liked that. It's like, I already have a fantastic environment. You're not going to, we're already on Gallifrey. It's not going to make it any more fantastic for me to pretend we're in a holodeck and someone's trying to kill you. So I thought this use of the Matrix, where it's actually performing its function of memory storage and retrieval, was the best use of the Matrix I've seen on screen so far.
It stores the katra of all Time Lords past and present, all of their thoughts and consciousness and living and dead, which would seem like it's basically the internet. And so the Master, like you mentioned, invites the Cybermen to come to Gallifrey, and then I did miss the point where, as you call him, Gandalf, Kosharmus, he tells Ryan and Ethan to, as they're preparing for battle, gird your loins, gentlemen. And Ryan's like, I don't know how to do that. I thought that was good. I know what that means, but it's like wrap your robe around yourself. So there's this nice moment between Graham and Yaz as they're preparing to put on the cyber armor, where he stops to tell Yaz how impressed he is by her. He thinks that she's the best person he's ever met, and perhaps the best human. It seemed a little over the top.
I have in my notes, Graham over the top praises Yaz.
Yeah.
And it risks coming off as creepy old man interest in young woman. It's so over the top.
Yeah.
I mean, you're the best person I've ever met. Come on.
Is it deserved? I mean, have we seen?
Well, that's
enough?
The other thing is it felt like informed attributes. We're telling the audience how great Yaz is, but we haven't seen Yaz be that great that consistently. I mean, she's been better, but in fact, fans have been complaining about Yaz hasn't had enough to do.
Right.
And to just then start telling her she's the best person Graham has ever met comes off as hollow.
Yeah, we've seen a few moments where she's really stepped up this season, but not enough to really justify this. I did like how she's like goes back and you're pretty good too. And he's like, is that it?
He gets really offended over that. It's like, hey, I just gushed about you and you just said I'm okay.
And then she says, oh, well, I'm from Yorkshire. That's high praise. That's gushing.
That's a love letter.
That's a love letter, right?
And it's also a literary device known as bathos, where you use understatement to make a point, like Saul of Tarsus saying he's from Tarsus, which is no common city.
Right.
No common city means it's really great, and you're not such a bad human means you're a really great human.
That's right. So the Doctor and the Master are in the Matrix chamber, and he tells her that he was hacking the Matrix system as you do, and that's when he stumbled on everything, and he puts her in this paralysis field for whatever reason, like because he thinks that she's going to try to escape from him or something, and then sends her deep into the Matrix to find out the truth about herself.
Meanwhile, he's on the outside talking to the lone Cyberman,
right?
And he explains for the audience that he's so mentally powerful, he can be dealing with the Doctor in the Matrix and be talking to the Cyberman, so he can be in two places at once mentally, which is great. I like that. Also,
he had a great line. He had a great line when the Doctor first appears in the Matrix. Are you suffering comfortably?
Yeah. As opposed to, are you sitting comfortably?
Yeah.
Again, which is the classic BBC children's presenter type thing.
Right.
Also, I like when he's talking with Ashad, the lone Cyberman, he's noting that, why are you wanting to kill all organic life? I mean, you have organic components too. You more than most. I mean, I don't want to conversion shame you. Yeah. Which is such a great line because he is ashamed of his conversion.
Right.
He wanted to be fully.
Yep.
Yeah. But then he's trying to strike an alliance with the Cybermen, which we've seen the Master do before, in World Enough in Time and Dark Water, sort of.
Yep.
Right. The Master is always trying to. The thing is, that the Master, no matter what, when he's trying to make an alliance with someone, it's never that he's willing to be subject to them. His plan is to betray them at some point. He's got his own agenda,
or take them over, or rule them, or
at least use them until they're no longer useful.
Right. Yep. So meanwhile, Ashad has to go take care of the stowaways, Graham and Yaz and the others, and he wants to do it himself because he doesn't want to delegate it apparently. It's just typical. But he shows up in the room, and they're in the suits inside the stasis chambers, and we have this very creepy moment where he's staring at them, and you can see them staring out through the eye holes of the helmet, and he's like looking in it, and we haven't heard this. Like, was it Yaz who had the tear? Like the stress of it was causing like a tear to run down. I'm not sure where they were going with that. Where he was sensing something about them that he was sensing. Well,
he was
emotion.
actually like sniffing that something smelled different, and he couldn't quite figure it out. Like he'd actually hear him sniffing, like the suit.
And then there's even a moment where it seems to come from Graham's cardboard box that he's in. He drops something, and you hear this little ping, and the Ashad spins around. But before he can investigate further, he gets over the intercom that we're in the perfect position to go through the Stargate.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, the reason why he went down and investigated is because they got an alert that some of these units had gone offline.
Yeah, that's right. Someone had tampered with them, so he figured they were in there.
That's what he was investigating, is what happened with these units.
All right, so now the next is where we get the key information in this episode. This is where the big reveal is. The Master tells the tale of Tecteun, a Sheboygan.
Yeah, I thought Sheboygan is
not from Sheboygan,
Wisconsin.
I know. And I also thought of the Bogans from the Star Wars drafts.
That's right. So the Master tells the tale of Tecteun from the Sheboygan were the people who lived on Gallifrey in its prehistory, the original residents, the indigenous species.
And this is something that is neat, because here Chibnall is not making something up. and he's not drawing it from previous televised stories. This is coming from the expanded media. I went back and researched it, and when we've had the native non-Time Lords, the native Gallifreyans mentioned before on screen, the word Shibogan is never used in the previous scripts. I looked up on TARDIS Wikia for the Shibogans, and there's bunches of references in the spin-off media, and they even list some TV stories where they're mentioned, but I went and looked at the transcripts of those TV stories, and they're never called the Shibogans in those. So this is Chibnall taking something from the spinoff media and elevating it to on-screen presence.
Interesting. And what the TARDIS wiki refers to them as, previously they were just seen as people living on the fringes of Time Lord civilization.
Yeah.
Right. So they're basically, in the Doctor's time, the present time, they're sort of people who've been left behind. But originally they were the original inhabitants. And this Tecteun was the first Gallifrey, the first person from Gallifrey, the first Shibogan to go out into space, to
invent space travel all by herself because woman power or something. I mean, she doesn't need NASA.
Right. This is not just invent space travel, but invent it to the point where you can travel to other worlds. I mean, that's pretty fantastic.
FTL.
So she in her explorations, she finds this gateway, a boundary, which, by the way, is it the same as the boundary they just traveled through? It looks a lot like it, the special effect does.
Yeah, but it does, and I think there's meant to be a connection of some kind, but there's no architecture near it like that. Also, the boundary that we've been playing with goes elsewhere in our universe, but the Master tells us this goes to an unknown dimension or universe.
Right.
And it's like, how do you know that if you don't go through it?
Right. Unless, maybe it's something about it tells you that it's
maybe
the advanced sensors that she had on her ship told her, and blah blah blah,
or
that
something
she invented in her spare time, as well as space travel and warp drive.
Yep, exactly.
So, we don't know how long these people lived. Maybe the Shibogans lived 1,000 years anyway. But anyway, at this boundary, she encounters a child, and this is where we see now that image that the Doctor got earlier on in the season, that pre-flash or flashback. This is where we see the same child, the same architecture, and this boundary. And this child was thrown through from the other realm, and she had a decision to take the foundling and make her own child to adopt her, or to leave her behind, which I'm not sure, who would leave a child all alone behind, but she didn't.
I want to know how long she stayed there before taking the child, to see if the child's parents would come for it.
Yeah. And what did the child have to say about herself?
Or, since you're an explorer, why don't we go through this boundary and see if your parents are on the other side?
Right. So they return to Gallifrey. The child remains a mystery until one day she dies in an accident and is regenerated. And we are told this is the first regeneration on Gallifrey. So this is the first confirmation that before this, there were no Time Lords who regenerated.
And it's eerily similar to what happened to Brendan in Ireland, where instead of being shot and falling over a cliff, the little girl is struggling over a toy laser gun with her friend, and she accidentally falls over the cliff. And who knows, maybe maybe Sigmund Freud was right, and early childhood traumas scar you for the rest of eternity, and this is where her fear of guns comes from.
Could be. So, meanwhile, the other half of the Master's consciousness is talking to the Cybermen, and he offers Gallifrey to them as raw material for them. They've always been trying to conquer it, and so now they can have it. Ashad, the lone Cyberman, says,
"Actually, we've never had the Cybermen on Gallifrey before."
Well, but he says
not on screen,
right? But he says that this has always been your goal, or this is something. Yep. So the Master says it, but it's never been.
He goes back and forth about that. He says maybe none of it. At first he says this is what your forebears have fantasized about for all this time, but then later he says, I don't know, maybe you never thought of this before.
That's true. Yeah, he was going back and forth.
But of course it's the Master, so he could be just being sarcastic about, you've never thought about this before.
Right, that's true.
Yeah.
So the one thing that comes up is that the Ashad, the cyber leader, reveals what again he said last episode, and he kind of goes into more detail now. His goal is the destruction of all organic life in the universe using this death particle that the Siberian created and that he houses within his chest, like in Tony Stark's arc reactor in his chest.
Mm-hmm. Well, the problem I have with that, though, is he says he wants the death of everything, all organic life. And then they nerf it later by saying, "Oh, we heard a legend about this death particle being just destruction of organic life on a planet."
Yeah, so you need multiple death particles. You need a death particle for every planet.
Exactly.
But I noticed they kind of walked that back to make it less dramatic later on. That's something that you could smooth over with dialogue. You could have just mentioned that qualifier right up front. But so we've got this death particle that he says the Siberian made from him. And also, so now we find out what the ascension of the Cybermen that the last episode was named after is about. Apparently, what he was doing, because he says, my new Cybermen have been purged of organic components. So apparently, when that Cyberman, when he was like drilling on that Cyberman in the previous episode and the Cyberman was screaming, apparently he was killing the organic components of the Cyberman. And so his new Cybermen don't have that. And then after he's wiped out or done what he needs to, he's going to kill his own organic components and go full
mechanized.
automation.
Yeah. And I love the Master's reaction. Like, so you just want to become robots? Any idiot can become a robot.
Yeah, you'd swing a stick in the universe and hit robots. I used to do that.
Yes, that's not special. And then he says, "Let's workshop it. I have notes," which is totally a Hollywood sort of thing. I love that.
Are you questioning the Siberium's plan? I am, because it's good, but it's not great.
It totally sounds like a network executive. So I can imagine who Chris Chibnall is thinking of, must be thinking of at this moment. So then we hop back to the Doctor in the Matrix. Where she meets Neo. No, I'm sorry. But Tech Dayun's investigation of her child took years, we're told, and goes through several regenerations. Now,
yeah, what's up with, did they keep falling off cliffs? How reckless was the Doctor as a child? Why did she go through so many?
I didn't take it like that.
I took it the way Father Corey did.
Went Looney Tunes and started basically killing her kid to see how many times the kid would regenerate.
That's the other possibility, and it also occurred to me, but, really? Were Tech Dayun is portrayed otherwise as
the Master in his dialogue made it sound like she became obsessed.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely obsessed. And I could see someone becoming that obsessed.
I don't know. I counted them, and there's 7 or 7 incarnations, so 6 regenerations that the child has. And would that be dark?
That's pretty dark. I think that makes more logical sense than being like the most self-destructive child in history.
She wanted to figure out what caused the regenerations. What better way to do that than study
the person
undergoing regeneration?
Oh, yeah, I know,
as it's happening. So you gotta, if you're gonna do it in a controlled environment,
I know.
It's dark. It's dark and nasty.
Dark.
And I have a feeling that's exactly what they were implying.
Well, I personally don't like that. Think about the recklessness of that. You've adopted this child. The child falls off a cliff. You think the child is dead. There's a big explosion of stuff, and then you have a new child. My first thought is not going to be, let's throw the child off a cliff again.
No,
even if I suspect this could happen again, I don't know. I don't know that this is going to happen again. And if it doesn't, I'm going to be responsible for the child's death.
Yeah.
I prefer a happier theory where you're right, Dom, and Shobogans live for 1,000 years anyway, and the Doctor's species, whatever it is, it doesn't. And so she lived several lives that way. Either that or there were a bunch of accidents in the lab that Tech Dayun didn't cause.
Given how dark other Time Lord leaders like Rassilon and others have been, how cold-blooded and cruel, I have a feeling that at the root of all that is Tech Dayun. I don't know.
Went off the deep end.
I want to hear from the listeners. What do you think? Is Tech Dayun a homicidal maniac?
Or a loving mother.
Or a loving mother who's trying to save their child.
Homicidal.
Yes. So let's hear from you. So anyway, Tech Dayun finally figures out the secret and splices the DNA into herself, this genetic ability to regenerate and becomes
as you
the first.
do, which
as
is,
you do.
I mean, this really comes out of science history. Scientists will experiment on themselves like this.
Yep.
There was the guy who figured out that you can use antibiotics to treat ulcers because everyone thought it was something else, and he's like, no. This is microbiome. This is microbes doing these ulcers, and I'm going to prove it. And he gave himself ulcers microbially, and then cured himself.
Yeah, I mean, because really, ethically, you can't do it to another human being, so you do it to yourself. So,
you can't legally do it to other human beings, and you can't. It's even. I mean, it really is Reed Richards and the gang getting on the spaceship to go up in the untested system.
Right. The Fantastic Four. So Gallifrey, the Master says, becomes a self-appointed ruling elite over the universe. They artificially restricted the number of regenerations to 12. That's something we talked about last time.
And that's also well in the spin-off media. But then it's because we've on screen from the 5 Doctors forward, we've known they could give additional cycles of regenerations. And in the spin-off media, it's been well discussed that this was artificial.
We talked about Trial of the Valeyard, where that comes up.
Right. Yes, in the Big Finish production.
Big Finish. So,
and they kept the secret of the Timeless Child to themselves. And then the Master tells her what we already knew, which is the Doctor is the Timeless Child. So and it blows her mind. Which that's the reference to something that's coming up. Yeah, and we'll talk about the implications of all this again, like I said at the end. So, but back on the Boundary Planet, Ryan and the others, Ethan and Gandalf, are running through the maze of tents to hide from the Cybermen. I'm not sure why the Cybermen don't just like knock down all the tents, but that's okay. And Ethan is captured, and they think he's about to get killed. That they're gonna, because they can't get to him in time. And they hear all these shots, and then it turns out that half of the Cybermen that were holding him were actually Graham and Yaz and the others who showed up in their suits and took out the Cybermen holding Ethan. The Master, this was a surprise to me.
And I like how after they take them out, Graham gets a comedic line of because Yaz has pulled off her helmet and says, "Does it make sense now?" And then Graham is like tugging on his, and he says, "Yaz, I can't get this hat off." So the Master is with Ashad on the cyber carrier, meets him, confronts him, and suddenly minimizes him, like compresses him. Out of the blue. It's set up, though, because he says, "Come on, Cyberium, show us some leg. What do you really look like?"
Right.
And Ashad says, "The Cyberium won't leave me as long as I'm alive." And so he turns his back and says, "Oh, okay. Thwam!" And he shrinks him. Yep. And then I love how a minute later it's like, "Oh, I should have said somebody needs to cut you down to size. I'll use it next time."
That was
missed a chance for a quick line.
Yeah, that was great. Oh, because we always do that, right? You always think of the great line you should have said, like in the moment and just later.
Yeah.
But I thought it was like a sudden, like this is the end of Ashad's storyline. No more Ashad. No more of his plan. Yeah. No more information about who he was or what he was all about. It's just boom. And it was sudden and shocking.
I would think it was completely fitting, and it was, because you can see the Master's wheels were turning. It's like, oh, you've got something more powerful that you have, and I want. I will get it from you.
And from a story perspective, it's time in this story to move to the Master's plan. Like that's really what this is about.
So he now plays "Let's Make a Deal" with the Cyberium.
Well, before he does that, I like this moment where he picks up the little toy figure now. And he's like, "Well, I really thought that would activate the death particle," and he kind of is disappointed that he didn't die in that moment.
Exactly.
He says he would have been okay with it, but here we all are still alive.
Right.
So it's part of the Master madness of I am kind of suicidal, but I'm also, if I'm not going to die, I'm going to dominate.
Yes,
exactly.
So you were saying, Jimmy, the next thing
so he plays "Let's Make a Deal" with the Cyberium, and the Cyberium gets on board with this because he says, "Look, I've got all the knowledge of the Matrix, you've got all the knowledge of the Cybermen, let's get together and make cyber babies." And and so the Cyberium goes into him, and this is when he has his Daffy Duck moment.
Right.
Where he's just like freaking out in a Daffy Duck like, ooh, way.
Kind of dancing around and yeah.
Also, I noticed the fickleness of the Cyberium.
Yeah.
Because originally the Cyberium was on board. Well, originally we don't know, but when the Cyberium was working with Ashad, it was like wanting to kill all organic life. But now it's on board with the Master's plan of let's not kill all organic life, but let's dominate anyway.
Well, and then when it was with Shelley, it was like, I don't want to be part of the Cybermen at all.
Right. And but I was thinking about back to Shelley and when the Cyberium was out of him for the first time, the Cyberium seems to not really have much agency. It seems to be an artificial intelligence that is slaved to whatever actual intelligence it's inhabiting. And so when it's in Shelley, it doesn't want to be part of the Cybermen. Then it doesn't know whether to go with the Doctor or Ashad. It could go with either one.
Yep.
And then when it goes with Ashad, it adopts Ashad's ideology of we're going to kill all organic life because he's ashamed of being organic. And then when it goes into the Master, it's like, no, we're not going to kill all organic life. We're going to dominate it instead. And so it seems to just be an AI that is not like Skynet that rules everything. It genuinely serves whoever's in charge of it.
Well, I really got kind of the impression that it's meant to be kind of basically a self-aware database, if you will, where it's artificial intelligence, but it's artificial intelligence for the purpose of distributing information, all the information it has stored within it.
Right.
It doesn't actually act on its own.
Well, except when it does.
It is an intelligent. It's artificial intelligence. So I think it's more than just Google that stores information.
No, what I mean though is it's not going to have its own
agenda,
ideas and plans. It's like, okay, I'm going to help you get your plans put in place as easily and quickly as possible.
Right.
But it doesn't have any of its own self plans for world domination or anything like that. Right. It's just like, you want information? Here it is. And here's more. And here's more.
Yeah, and it'll help develop strategy for you, but you're the general setting the strategic goals.
Yeah,
exactly.
So back in the Matrix, the Doctor, tells the Master, it's all lies. And he says, no, for the first time ever, it's the truth. And then he's enraged. He rages at her that what really makes him mad is that everything he is, all that he is because there's a piece of her in him. The fact that all that he is as the Master, as a Time Lord, as the Regenerator, is because part of the Doctor makes it possible. And that's what really has put him even more over the edge than he normally is.
Yeah.
And this I thought was nice because this is so devastating to him. He assumes it's going to be devastating to her too.
Right.
Which in the end, it's not going to be once she has a chance to deal. But he's assuming, oh, this was devastating to me to learn it's all because of you. And so he assumes she's going to be devastated as well. But because he always wants to bring the Doctor down to his level. That's a long-standing pattern with the Master. Also, I thought it did a nice job of explaining why the Master would want to destroy Gallifrey. Because remember, when we first got this concept that he was the one that did it, I said, it's going to be hard to come up with something that will make sense for we understand why the Master would want to do that and how that would be justified in his eyes. What secret would be so bad? Well, from his perspective, I've only lived as long as I have and been able to do the things I've done because I've got a part of the Doctor in me.
Yeah.
Right. And everybody else here has a part of the Doctor in them too. And they lied to us about this. It's like, burn it all to the ground.
Right. Right. So, and then he gives her the last bit of information that's in the Matrix about her, about revealing this Section 31 group called the Division. Yeah. We exist, but we don't exist. And that somehow, Time Lords don't intervene except when we do. And so we're given this idea that we like a hint of some more information that maybe future seasons will reveal to us of what the Doctor did as part of the Division. And we get
I want my Big Finish Dr. Ruth set now.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And that'll be interesting. And then there's a whole this is when the Doctor starts to get flashes of the Brendan storyline, the Irish Garda policeman from last episode. We don't get a full explanation, but they don't like explicitly tell us, but it's implied that this was an overlay of a memory on top of the real memories of what happened to her.
Well, and they flashed in that meeting where there's the two of them there with that lead woman who's talking.
Right.
And it's flashing back and forth between that and the meeting at the Garda.
I think they were pretty explicit about it. The master says that your mom, Tecteyun, put this as an overlay over these memories so that if anyone came across them in the Matrix, they wouldn't realize it was significant and they'd leave it alone. Oh. Because the key part of this meeting where she's being inducted into the division is deleted. And he says there's tons of stuff here that was here and it's all been wiped and I can't recover it.
Deleted or at least encrypted to a point where he can't get at it.
Yeah,
they were really clear. They kind of kept going back and forth between deleted and
is
just
it gone or is it not?
Encrypted to the point of unrecoverable.
Yeah.
Right. Which are kind of the same thing. I mean, in computer technology, because when you wipe something, you're frequently overwriting it and maybe, I don't know.
There's the hint that we'll find out this stuff later, though.
That's my wondering too, if they're going to come back to that in this whole story of the Division, which by the way would make a great spin-off.
The Division,
we'll get covered later.
Yeah. But the master is pretty explicit about the fact that this is these Ireland memories are an overlay that Tecteyun put on this data so it wouldn't get deleted and you could one day find it and figure it out and realize its significance. So the Ireland sequences are a compressed version of the Doctor's life.
Yes.
You have the finding of the baby, the bringing home of the baby, the adoption, the going over the joining the guard, the going over the cliff, the retirement with the mind wipe. And then on the back of the clock, it says for services to the division.
Right.
And so Father, Corey, you were right. This was a virtual memory thing that was a symbol of something else. How did you come up with that? That was really insightful. I just,
again, as like I said last episode, it was kind of looking at the filmography of anything else. And, you'd mentioned, Jimmy, of course, that's kind of a common thing of when you talk about past memories is used the sepia tone and all that. But it felt so much like, because it was so incongruous with everything else that was going on in the episode,
right?
That there's really isn't an actual event, but it is portraying an actual event, just not the actual people involved in the actual setting and everything.
Right.
Where it was that symbolic imagery of an actual event, it just, it really, it has kind of made a gut feeling of that's what they were trying to say.
Well, I'm very impressed. Also, it's nice to finally know that the Doctor used to be a ginger. And that's right. Presumably why the Doctor wants to get back to that. And also, it's nice to know finally that Gallifrey is in Ireland, or more properly, Ireland was on Gallifrey. There you go.
So the Master then reveals, they come out of the Matrix, and the Master reveals that his goal is to create a new race using this technology, using the regeneration ability. And he regenerates Time Lord bodies from all the Time Lords he killed in cyber armor with the ability, so they have the ability to repair. So if a Cyberman gets shot and dies, he regenerates and is alive again, able to fight again.
Yeah. So how did he kill them without them regenerating and still have the bodies intact?
That's a good question.
They don't really say anything about that.
With their regeneration cycles intact and maybe even restored to unlimited status.
That's the thing. And, maybe the understanding of what allowed them to regenerate was it allowed him to find a way to turn it off for him to kill them. So perhaps, and then turn it back on.
Just kind of top of the head thought, this could be the loophole they're going to use to bring the Time Lords back someday.
Right. To get them out of the cyber armor. Yeah.
Yep.
But by the way, notice this is exactly what Missy did in Dark Water and Death in Heaven, where she used human corpses to make a cyber army. Yep. This is the same thing, only now we're not giving the army to the Doctor to do with what he wants. Now we're keeping it for ourselves.
And he calls them cyber masters, which is, and he throws on the Doctor's face that they're born from you. That you are the root of all of these. That they're your children in a sense.
Born from you, but led by me. How does it feel?
Meanwhile, the rest of the humans they come through the boundary. I like this moment where the Graham's sort of like, okay, someone, one of us is going to have to, approach this, see what happens, and Yaz just walks through it. Like she just like, nope, I'm going, boom, and goes right through it. So at least we're having retroactively her living out this praise that Graham gave her.
I hate to say it, but I think that whole speech by Graham was to set up that moment.
Probably.
I think it was also to inform the audience of what a great person Yaz is, despite the fact she's perceived as not having much to do.
That's probably true too. So the doctor in the Matrix sees Dr. Ruth, comes to her, and that she's having this identity crisis, and the doctor, have you ever been limited by who you were before? Like the Dr. Ruth is kind of bucking her up, telling her, hey, you've got this, and I wonder, is it really Dr. Ruth, or is it just the Matrix talking to her, or the doctor's own consciousness?
I think it pretty much was just like a Matrix construction of Dr. Ruth. It wasn't actually Dr. Ruth herself.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think it's the Matrix manifesting, because it's a mental environment. And so I think it's the Matrix manifesting the part of the doctor that was Ruth. And it's just an externalization of the doctor's own thought process of what would this part of me have said.
And then we get this great moment where the doctor realizes that the way to get out of the Matrix, like the Matrix blew her mind, but now she's going to blow the Matrix's mind. And she does it with blasting it with all her memories, all of them that she has.
Well, then there was a reference of that she'd fought the Matrix before, and of course we saw that Trial of the Time Lord,
right?
Mm-hmm. Also the Deadly Assassin.
So then we get this great montage, very quick, of all of these memories, including a brief flash of the Fourth Doctor with all of the faces from that. Like, remember we talked about this before.
Brain and Morbius doctors.
Yes, the Morbius doctors. They
are all canon now, which was the original intent.
Yeah.
I love the comment I saw online is, boy, Chris Chibnall went through a lot of work this season to canonize the Morbius doctors.
Good on him.
And we get a bit of the classic Doctor Who theme there as that wraps up too. I like that.
Yeah. Well, it's I went through step by step, and there's lots and lots and lots and lots of people on here. There's lots of scenes from the Chris Chibnall era of Doctor Who, but you see all the Masters, you see all the Doctors, you see a bunch of the companions, you see
villains.
It's tons of them. You see the Kablam robot.
Right.
Some of these are like literally one frame. You see just a person flash on for one frame. Bunch of classic Who enemies like this. Zygons, classic Zygons, and things like that. So it's pretty impressive, the clips they pulled together.
Giant
colorized, by the way. The first and second Doctor, those were colorized.
Oh, right.
One of the best ways to watch this is depending. So I was initially watching it streaming, and the streaming application wouldn't let me step through it a piece at a time. Right. And obviously it's not out on DVD or Blu-ray yet. But a good way to watch it, if you want to watch it in depth, is there are clips of it already on YouTube. So you can watch it there and then put it on quarter speed.
Right.
And watch it at quarter speed on YouTube in the settings, and it'll make it much easier to process. Also, there is a dissected list. I'm not sure they got everything, but there is a dissected list on the page for the Timeless Children on TARDIS Wikia.
I can imagine the continuity list on that.
Yeah, that's where it is. It's in the continuity list, and it's huge. They even note this has more reuse of on-screen media than any prior episode. It's like, you think?
Yeah, exactly. So as the Doctor is breaking out of the Matrix and regaining consciousness, that's when the companions show up in the Matrix room, and the Doctor has to stop the new race of Cyber Masters, which have this great costume now that the Master's given them, which combines both the that fan-like thing that the Time Lords have above them and the cyber armor. And they plan to blow up the cyber carrier. That's their first step. But the Doctor knows it's not enough. They need the death particle, of course. The Chekhov's death particle has to be used. And so the humans go aboard the cyber carrier to set the explosives. And the Doctor finds Mini Ashad. And, of course, this was a trap laid by the Master. He led her to it.
Because he wants to reduce the Doctor to his level. He's okay with dying if that happens. He just wants to pull the Doctor down. And if not, he wants to dominate.
And so the Doctor challenges him to a one-on-one face-off in the Matrix chamber. Of course, they set all these bombs on timers. And, of course, for plot reasons, they malfunction and now they have to run to get off the cyber carrier instead of having plenty of time to saunter off of it.
And somehow they're able to just walk off of the cyber carrier in time, and everything goes boom.
Yes, right above them.
I love how Graham turns to Gandalf and says, "Thanks for the warning," and he says, "You're alive, aren't you?"
Yeah, that's right. The cyber carrier blows up. The Doctor takes them to a classic TARDIS, not her TARDIS. My wife was confused with this.
Her TARDIS is still off on the planet.
Yeah, is there just another TARDIS laying around? I'm like, well, it is Gallifrey. I'm sure there's plenty of TARDIS.
There's a number of them, actually.
It's like it's a hangar. There's a hangar bay at the base of the Citadel where they've got lots of TARDISes.
Exactly. So she's going to send them away on remote, and then use the death particle with an explosive to destroy everything on Gallifrey.
So she gets the explosive from Gandalf, and it's like, okay, this is for emergency use only.
Yep.
And she says, how does it trigger? And it's like manual trigger only. So this is something he was going to use to blow himself up and with any other Cybermen in the vicinity in emergency circumstances.
Right.
And she takes it, and it's like, I got to get in there and blah, 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 blah. And I'm going, no, Marty, you're not thinking fourth dimensionally. You are standing in a time machine. Go get one with a timer.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You have plenty of time to go find ones somewhere in the universe. A bomb with a timer. You could probably make one from stuff laying around inside the TARDIS.
Yeah. Oh, just contact Kerblam and have them send you one of those little kitchen clocks. Okay.
Yeah. Exactly. You've got Kerblam Prime. They'll get it there in time. Don't worry. So the Doctor says, she goes and confronts the Master. And, he tells her, like, he thinks he's broken her. And she's like, you haven't broken me. You've given me the gift of knowing myself, and makes her multitudes more. We get that, some Doctor grandstanding a little bit.
Oh, and this was a very interesting exchange between the two of them, because it's pounding on the fourth wall. Right. Because you have and Chibnall knew in advance the hardcore haters were going to be like, oh, he's broken the Doctor. So he has the Master saying, I've broken you. Right. And then the Doctor is like, no, you haven't broken me. You think this makes me lesser? It makes me more. That's Chris Chibnall's message to the haters.
Yep. Right.
The Doctor then says, you're scared of everything. Not the Masters. He's not scared of everything. That's Chris Chibnall talking to the hater fans.
Right. Mm-hmm. That's true.
The Doctor then drops the Walt Whitman line, I contain multitudes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So we have closure on our poetry smackdown.
And then she says, like Chris Chibnall is talking to the haters, you think I'd be scared because you're scared of everything. I'm not scared of everything. That he's projecting is what she says.
Exactly.
He wants her to blow up the death particle. He wants her to take out every life form. She started all of this, he says, with her weird DNA, and now she'll have to finish it. And you may have made me, but I have destroyed you, he says. Become death, become me. Destroyer of, I become death, destroyer of worlds. Yep. That line as well.
Thank you, Bhagavad Gita and Robert Oppenheimer.
Exactly. So, but then Koshamas shows up, the Gandalf figure. He takes the explosive from her to do the deed himself, and she runs for the TARDIS while the Master of the Cybermen stand there and let it happen. Like, what? Shooty, bang, bang?
So they're having this conversation, and the reason she lets him do it is because she thinks this is my responsibility. I caused this.
Right.
By sending the Cyberium into the future. And so he one-ups her by saying, no, you didn't start this. I started this. I was part of the resistance group that sent it back in time, but we didn't send it far enough. Yeah. And so consequently, I need to take responsibility for this. And she's willing to let him do that. And then he says, run, Doctor. And immediately she gets behind him. And that's when so that's how she gets away.
Yeah.
Because she immediately gets behind him to run out the door.
I'm going to guess that they should have sent the Terminator back in time to like maybe the middle of a sun, or like maybe not to Earth. That might have been better. Anyway, the TARDIS, the spare TARDIS that the fam is in, it shows up in a 21st century Earth neighborhood in London or Yorkshire, presumably, disguised as a house. Nobody notices the new house on the block.
That's the perception filter working as well.
Oh, okay.
That could be.
Yeah.
You just kind of happen to notice, there's a house there. Okay.
We should note though that the Doctor, or Koshamis has a confrontation with the Master, and he does get shot, but then we see his thumb press the button anyway.
Right.
And there's this massive detonation of the death particle that now should sterilize Gallifrey, including all of the corpses the Master had on ice.
Right. That's true. That might not be the way they get back. Anyway,
until the next retcon, of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
The Doctor had, before that, was able to get aboard yet another TARDIS, which she leaves disguised as a tree back on that planet where her TARDIS is. So thankfully, she gets her old TARDIS back, and she talks to it nicely.
Well, to spend all eternity in this place, not a bad way to go.
Yeah, as a tree.
Talking to the TARDIS as she's walking out. Oh, and also says, good chameleon circuit.
Yeah. Yeah. The Jadoon, so she's in the TARDIS, she's getting ready to go reunite with the fam, and suddenly the Jadoon transmat into the TARDIS, which is
Cold
remarkable.
Cases Unit.
Yes. Yep. They call her a fugitive, sends her to life imprisonment, put her in a jail, and she does a 10th Doctor thing. What? Like over and over again, which is great.
And did you notice the jail she's in? It's Shada, the Time Lord prison facility. Yes. And so they may have sent her back in time because they were supposed to drop her off to their client at the facility. And so she may have gone back in time to when Time Lords are still alive.
Right. Interesting. So that's where the episode ends.
They've already announced that the next episode will be sometime Christmas, New Year's. So we'll find out what's going on with that TARDIS somewhere around Christmas, New Year's.
Oh, good.
Or that prison. So,
and it's called Revolution of the Daleks.
In case you can't tell who the bad guy is going to be in that episode.
More Cybermen?
Exactly.
I had enough Cybermen. Okay. I guess Daleks are going to be the Christmas, New Year's enemy.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the implications and perhaps a little bit of the future. Although next week, I should point out, we're going to have an episode where we look back at the whole season and kind of give our thoughts across the season. But some of the implications raised by this episode.
I've got a bunch to say, but I'm going to save a bunch of it for next episode. By the way, before we depart from the notes on this episode, I liked during part of the Matrix sequence where the Doctor and the Master are outside, but they've grayed out the background except for the two central figures. So you see the Doctor and the Master in color, but they're against this landscape with grass and on a hill that's gray,
right?
Which is just a nice subtle touch to communicate the unreality of this. In terms of the overall thing, so I'm pleased. I have always been a fan of the idea that there were incarnations before William Hartnell. I think that was clearly implied. I have not been a fan of the 12 regeneration limit. I think I mean, they just came up with it in a throwaway line in a Tom Baker episode as a dramatic device, as a storytelling element. I thought, well, okay, it has very little impact on the current cycle of then Classic Who because we're in the fourth incarnation.
Right.
Now, since we saw 8 in the 8 previous incarnations in the brain of Morbius, you could say, oh, Tom Baker is the 12th. So we're about to have the last regeneration. And they could have tried to milk drama out of it at that time.
Right.
And they didn't.
They just kind of ignored it, yeah.
They ignored it. And then in the Peter Davison era for the 5 Doctors, they established, they immediately took the edge off because they said Time Lords could give the Master a whole new cycle of regenerations if they wanted. And so, okay, obviously then, whenever the series gets to the final Doctor, we're going to know exactly how they're going to solve this problem. Because they're not going to...
That'll happen in 50 years. I mean, we won't have to worry about that anytime soon. Wait.
Yeah, so it made no impact basically on the drama at the time. The place it would make drama is when you get to that final incarnation, but then we already know how they're going to solve it. They're going to give them a new cycle of regenerations. So you watch Matt Smith's final episode, and for a few minutes, and it's not that many, for a few minutes, there is a little bit of drama about, oh, guess what? I'm the last because that meta-crisis thing and the War Doctor. So out of nowhere, without the audience being told well in advance, I'm the last. So we only get a few minutes of drama out of that. And then they do exactly what we knew they would do for the last 50 years, give them a new cycle of regenerations. So they've shot their wad on that. That's never going to be dramatic again. So you may as well strip off the 12 regeneration limit, because you've already done that. We've been there. We've done that. It's not going to have the same drama as it could have, and that they didn't actually play out. So I'm fine with them getting rid of the 12 regeneration limit because it was never a big deal anyway, and it would be an even lesser deal in the future. So I think they've done future showrunners a favor. Also, by having the Doctor be not originally from Gallifrey. Now, she can still say I'm a Gallifreyan because she was raised there. And she can still say I'm a Time Lord because she graduated the Academy. But in terms of not knowing where she comes from, that was like the first 10 years of the show.
Right.
Yeah.
Where we didn't know where the Doctor came from. And so this is actually, restoring the show to the status quo ante, where there was no regeneration limit, and we didn't know how many regenerations there had been, because William Hartnell didn't say, I'm the first Doctor. He didn't get called the first Doctor on screen until Matt Smith's time. And so this is very recent that he's been officially numbered as the first of this cycle. So basically, we're back to the situation where we don't know who the Doctor's real people are. We don't know how many lifetimes there have been, and there are hints of previous ones we don't know about. And there is no regeneration limit. So we're back in the early days of the show. And what I've noticed, because I've gone looking for people who I knew would hate this, and I've deliberately watched their videos, including some where they're screaming and ranting. I mean, literally screaming about this. And I've noticed, okay, these tend to be younger people who are not fans of Classic Who, or who don't know Classic Who as well. And so they don't have a feel for this being the norm on the show. All they have a feel for is the recent time where we know, oh yeah, Matt Smith is the 11th Doctor. He said, I'm the 11th, and so I think part of their rage is because they don't have a feel for the show. And it's like, oh yeah, there was that line in Brain of Morbius, but we didn't take that seriously. Well, because you've been living and watching Who in a recent environment only. Whereas if you were there for the original broadcast of that, it's like, wow, the Doctor had previous regenerations. So they discount things because they bought too heavily into the recent narrative. And I've tried to process what is their problem here. I think part of it for some of them is they just don't like Chris Chibnall, and I can get on. I understand that, but they're just being irrational about this. Some of them are saying things like, this ruins William Hartnell as the first Doctor. How does it ruin him? Some people have said, well, it ruins his story arc of becoming more heroic, but he did become more heroic. Even if he was a little kidnappy in the first episode, he does grow as a character.
They addressed that in this episode of, they basically rebooted the Doctor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
William Hartnell was the first of the rebooted Doctor, where they took her to a child, because the Master says, all those things, going to the Academy and running through the streets, those all happened, but that wasn't your first lifetime.
Also, I found the people who really don't like this saying things like, somehow the additional regenerations that we don't know about cheapens the ones we have seen, and I don't get that at all.
I don't either.
The ones I've seen, I enjoyed, and knowing there are others, great. Maybe we get to explore some of those one day. You could have a one-off actor come in and be an unknown incarnation of the Doctor, maybe a famous actor who would be great for the part, but couldn't commit to doing it for a season or 3.
I can imagine Big Finish, as soon as they watch this, go, goody, 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 goody.
They're having conferences today.
and in fact, there are other Doctors of unknown, unseen regenerations in the spin-off literature. Not only in Big Finish, but in the novels. So really, this is what they've done here is not only restored the original status quo of the show, they've put it with the status quo of the spin-off media, where you can have other unseen regenerations because they're there in the stories. One other thing, so another criticism is it messes up the numbering of the doctors. No, it doesn't. You can still call William Hartnell the first.
That's a dumb.
He's the first of this cycle.
Yeah.
And also, I've seen people complaining, oh, but now the Doctor's not just an ordinary Gallifreyan again, just a madman with a box traveling the universe. Now he's special. Well, special in the sense that he had some genes that got torn out of him as a child.
Right. Well,
that doesn't make you divine.
Right. Well, it makes him not the same as all the other Gallifreyans, which, frankly, the Doctor hasn't been just a madman in a box for a very long time. Not in all of Who for certain. So, yeah.
And even before, I mean, you had the Cartmel Masterplan where he's clearly more special, and that got on screen. I am not just another Time Lord.
Right.
So I understand if you're a recent comer to Doctor Who and your formative experiences were with New Who, this is different for you, and you might not like it, and that's fine. People can have differences of opinion, but I don't think it's worth getting irrationally hatey about it. And partly, I think maybe read some comic books, because reboots and retcons are all over the place in comics. Never get too attached to a single vision of a character, because any long-living franchise is going to get reinterpreted at some point. And you may like it more, you may like it less, but your favorite stories are all out there, and you can headcanon anything you want, and don't freak out if it's not exactly to your taste at the moment.
See Marvel Cinematic Universe, Star Trek,
all I can say is this makes Curse of the Fatal Death canon.
Missy already did that.
I know.
And there is a line in one of the Missy Big Finish sets where Michelle Gomez is saying, "I'm not climbing through any more sewer pipes." There was quite enough of that on Tercerus.
Which, by the way, if you haven't seen that, that was a 1999 Red Nose Day, they call it, the charity telethon for children, children's charities. And it was Rowan Atkinson was the Doctor, the first one in this of 5. Yeah.
Something like that.
5.
Yeah.
Finishing with Joanna Lumley, if you've seen Absolutely Fabulous, you know who she is.
Yeah. And Hugh Grant, too, right?
Yeah, Hugh Grant was
Grant's
one.
in that.
Richard E. Grant. Yeah.
But doesn't this make Grand Moff Tarkin also potentially canon?
They covered him in another way. Stephen Moffat did in the novel for Day of the Doctor.
Right, that's right.
But to me, I don't like that explanation. In my head, Peter Cushing is the Doctor in an alternate version, and maybe a previous regeneration. I don't know. Yeah. By the way, one other thing I had thought about that this ruins William Hartnell is, what would William Hartnell think about that?
Yeah.
The idea there were after they introduced Patrick Troughton and replace him, the idea there were people before me playing this part, how does that ruin my time? Right.
No. It doesn't. All right. We need to bring things to a close here. This was a great discussion. We have feedback. I'm going to save that for next week because it probably goes with whatever feedback we'll get this week as well. So we'll cover all of your great feedback next time. But this is a great discussion. And like I said, we'll be back next time. But first, I want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Doctor Who, including this time Kim L., Michael S., Craig C., Christian C., and Mary N. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. What do you think of this season finale, The Timeless Children, and all of its implications? Let us know. And I'd also like to hear from you what your take is on the season, and we'll incorporate that feedback into next week's show as we have our discussion looking back on the whole season. So you can go to sqpn.com/Doctor Who or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page to leave comments. You can send us an email to drwho@sqpn.com. And we'll be back next time when we'll be discussing that retrospective of the season and your feedback on it. Until then, Father Corey Stika, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Doctor Who.
No, thank you, Dom.
And Jimmy Aitken, thank you as well.
Thanks, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, be brave, be swift, and most of all, be lucky.